Hello, everybody, friends. Hello, all my friends who do all the stuff and come to all my stuff. I appreciate that. This is a talk about Scottish kilts, obviously, folklore, tradition, and crafting. And let me just tell you a little bit about what this is and how this came about and all those kinds of things. So in 2018, our oldest son, who's an actor, was studying at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art in London. And he was there for the summer, and we thought it was our 30th anniversary, and so we decided we were going to go pick him up and make sure he came home. Our 25th anniversary. And so, is that right? I don't know. I got married in, what year is this? I don't know. 93. So yeah, it was our 25th anniversary. And so Jim and I went over there, and I had always wanted to go to Scotland, and really more so England, because I grew up in the 1980s with Wham! And Culture Club and all that kind of stuff. And so we flew into Amsterdam, and then we flew into Inverness. And while we were coming into Inverness, I said to Jim, I said to him out loud, I said, this is not good, because I really, really want to love this. I really want it to be just perfect. And I thought, there's no way. There's no way. And we got off the plane. It was one of those little Beatles 1964 planes, that they have to get down off the steps and then they walk across the tarmac and everything. And we come to Inverness Airport, which is, Inverness is like smaller than Mankato. And these two Yahoo Scotsmen were there, and they're like, hey, come on in, yeah, we'd love to see the shore, country, blah, blah. And I was hooked. I was ready. These people were so nice. And every time we've gone anywhere in Scotland, people have just been unbelievable. And so we weren't even there a day, and the Highland Games were going on in Inverness. And so we went to the Highland Games, and this bagpiper was very kind and taking pictures with a bunch of people, but they were already done playing. And so I said to Jim, I said, well, I'll just let him go. And he said, no. I said, oh, I don't know. And he clearly must have heard me. And he said, excuse me, Les, would you like a picture? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I already love you people. But yes, I would. And so he came over and took this picture with me. And this, of course, is what we think of oftentimes when we think of the Scottish kilt, the bagpipers. Or maybe you think of Jamie Fraser. Oh yeah, we're thinking about Jamie Fraser a lot, right? So this is Sam Heughan, who plays Jamie Fraser in the Outlander series, wearing a Fraser tartan. And that's actually not the true Fraser tartan. That's a Fraser tartan that was created for Outlander. So, just so you know, that's not the typical one. But there's a whole bunch of different kinds of Fraser tartans, and we can talk about that a little later. Or you might be thinking of these kinds of kilt, shepherds out in the fields, or maybe that wedding day where they've got all the gear on and things like that. But oftentimes we think about the bagpipers, or the pipe band, or maybe the lone piper in the Scottish Highlands in full regalia with his bagpipes and his sporran and all of his different accoutrements. But when we look at the folklore and the tradition of how this started, it's a little convoluted. And so there are a couple of myths that I want to talk about, and maybe you can help me guess if these are correct or not. The kilt was created in Scotland, true or false? True and false. True and false. Actually, this is something that's very similar to the original kilt. So this is a Greek chiton. If you're in the Roman era, you might call it a toga. They're a little different, but it's basically the same kind of thing. So this is a Greek chiton, and what it is a long piece of fabric. And so it can be wrapped around your body, it can be belted or tied. The chitons weren't tied, they were kind of free-flowing, but the kilt is basically a version of this that they belted. So it's a long blanket, and again, when we look at modern-day kilts, we think of them in all different sizes, and they're short little schoolgirl uniforms and things like that, but it was a utilitarian garment. It was something that they could use even as a tent out in the fields, in the pastures and things like that. They could wrap themselves in it, or they could kind of tie it up and use it a couple of different ways. When we look at what the modern day kilt is, we have to thank Sir Walter Scott, who's the poet of Scotland, and he writes a book called Rob Roy. That's Liam Neeson, who played Rob Roy in the film. Liam Neeson, by the way, not Scottish, he's from Ireland. But anyways, so Sir Walter Scott writes this book called Rob Roy, set in the Scottish Highlands, and then we start to get something clearly that looks a little bit more like what we know of as the modern day kilt. But even this is similar to what it was originally. And so originally, they were putting on a garment like this, okay? So, and I have to read this so I get the measurements right. So this is called a belted plaid or a belted plate or a great kilt, okay? It's really the crisscross kind of pattern that we see on it, and we all know what that crisscross pattern looks like. It was made from 2 pieces of cloth around 28 inches wide. The size of a hand loom at that time was 28 inches wide, and 3 to 4 yards length. These 2 pieces were sewn together at the width, making the cloth double the width, and today we sew them by the length. So if you look at something like this kilt over here, which is in progress, you can see right here in the middle, the 2 sections have been seamed together, okay, and then we'll hide them in the pleat and you won't be able to see them. When this was created, when this was woven, they would stitch them together the width way, so they would be 28 inches and then longer, right? And then they could utilize it as the different kinds of forms here. So the way that they would do that, the gentleman who's just got the white shirt on is actually laying down, okay? So they would put the belt down and they would lay the kilt on top, and then he could lay down on that and he'd take the ends of the belt and he'd stand up, and then all of it would be in the back. And then he would move it around so it wasn't all bunched in the back, and of course if you turn around, it looks like pleating, right? Because it's all kind of gathered in the back like that. And so you can see a couple of different ways that they would wear it. They might wear it a little shorter. Wool, this kind of tartan has a tendency to get really crisp when it gets wet, and so it would cut the backs of their legs, and that's why they would be shorter. They'd have to pull them up so that, because the grasses were hitting the bottom of the kilts, and then the kilts would get wet, and then it would cut on their legs. So they could do that, or they could wear it a little longer if it was colder outside. They could maneuver it so that if you lay down and you belt it up and you take a piece of the tartan and put it on this side and take a piece of the tartan and put it on this side, you got pockets. If you undid that and brought it over your head, you got a cape, right? I mean, it's like every kid does this, and they just, right? They just did it. And so you can kind of see all the different ways that it could have been worn. I really love this picture down here. Where am I? Right here. With all of that folding, and then this is just brought up as a cape. Just completely utilitarian garment. Tartans are only found in Scotland. Mrs. Allen?
Sorry.
False, right?
No, they're in Ireland.
They're in Ireland, that's right. That's right, they're in Ireland. This is the saffron kilt of a pipe band in Ireland. Have you seen a pipe band in Ireland by chance?
I've seen them in
Yeah.
Ireland.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so this is the saffron kilt, made famous in Ireland. And I should tell you, this is a little bit of a side note here, but I was just telling Margaret that we went to a couple different places while we were there, because going to those places from here is really expensive. But going to those places from Scotland is actually not too bad. So we went to Athens, Greece for $200. Right, that would never happen, right? And we went to Belfast in Northern Ireland for $80. It was $80 for $80 flight, $80 flight. And so we were in Northern Ireland for a couple of days. We went to Derry. We were in Belfast, and we stayed at an Airbnb on a ranch. This guy had built this extra house on his land. And we were staying there, and Jim was talking to him about where we were going to go. We're going to go to Derry. We're going to go to Belfast. Just stay in Northern Ireland. And he said, "It's Ireland." Right? It's Ireland. Because those troubles that happened in the 1960s and 70s, alive and well. And if you ever go to Ireland, in the northern part of Ireland, if you ever go to Derry, you can feel it. You can feel it. And it's very small. I mean, the northern part of Ireland is very small. And then when we were driving around, we'd see people flying the British flag, and I thought, ooh, that's a hardy stock. I don't know if I'd fly the British flag in, in the northern part of Ireland. It's just fascinating. An Englishman actually invented the modern day kilt. Actually not. There's an Edinburgh magazine in 1785 that says an Englishman did create the kilt, but that is actually untrue. And there's a whole long story that's tied to it, and much of it has to do with industry. And so there's a transition from the short kilt to the short kilt that we know today, because these belted plaids were being worn, and they could be worn shorter, but they could also be worn longer. But when the Industrial Revolution happens, all this industry happens in northern Scotland, you can't wear a kilt in a factory, right? You can't. That's really, really dangerous. And so in the early 1700s, even, we start to see people leaving the farms, going into these major cities and things like that, working in factories. And so the kilts start to become impractical, and so the manipulation of them changes. And then the Battle of Culloden happens, and in 1748, there's a ruling that all Highland dress is restricted. And it's something called sumptuary laws, and you see this sometimes throughout history, that only certain classes of people can wear certain colors or certain patterns and things like this, and this is no different. So after the Battle of Culloden, there was all this animosity, and so all Highland dress was outlawed. And that went around for about 35, 36 years. But it was about a couple of generations of people who had been used to wearing the kilts to where those people had died off that were wearing the kilts. And so it became something that was obsolete and something that old people did, and then nobody did. And so I have a couple of little articles here. This one was enforced for almost 36 years, a whole generation of Scots. And I want to draw your attention to this part right here. And it says, no man, where does it say? No man or boy within the part of Great Britain called Scotland, other than such as would be employed as officers and soldiers in His Majesty's forces, would on any pretense whatsoever wear or put on the clothes commonly called Highland clothes, that is to say, the plaid, the philibeg, or little kilt, the trowel, shoulder belts, or any part of whatsoever of what peculiarly belongs to the Highland garb, and that no tartan or party-colored plaid or stuff should be used for greatcoats or for upper coats under the penalties therein mentioned. And so it was enforced by law that you could actually not wear any kind of Highland dress. And so in 1782, though, there's a royal assent given, which means the monarchy approves it, to repeal this ban on Highland dress. And basically it all comes down to, as everything does, it comes down to business. So there's these guys in London, and they're trying to figure out how to make a buck, and they're thinking, hey, if we can rejuvenate the Scottish garb, maybe we can make some money off of this. And then a couple of things happen. So this edict is passed, this assent is passed, that we should be able to wear Highland garb again. And this one, I don't know where it is in here, but it says, be it therefore enacted by the King's most excellent majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the Lords Spiritual and Temporal and Commons, in this present Parliament assembled, and by the authority of the same, that so much of the acts above mentioned, or any other act or acts of Parliament, as restrains the use of the Highland dress, be and the same are hereby repealed. And so now that we can make some money, however, the challenge happens, nobody cares about it anymore. It's been a couple generations, nobody really wants to have this done anyways. But we've got an issue here. So Sir Walter Scott comes in and he says, I think we can help you out. And with that, at the same time, George IV is due to visit Edinburgh. And so if you know anything about Scotland, I mean, we hear about Inverness and Edinburgh and Glasgow and Aberdeen, and it's really those are the only 4 cities really in Scotland. So that's why you hear about them, right? But they're small. I mean, like I said, Inverness is about the size of Mankato. Edinburgh and Glasgow are pretty big cities, but still nothing like we think of as big cities. But anyways, so the king is coming to Edinburgh. And so Sir Walter Scott's in charge of this big festival, and he says, I know everybody should come and wear their Highland gear. And of course the people there are like, no, I don't know what our tartan is. I don't know what a tartan is. I don't know what we're gonna do. Just to give you a point of reference, this is all happening around the same time as Jane Austen is living and writing in the early 1800s, and the president at that time is James Monroe. So anyway, so we've got this royal visit coming, and so a few people have their tartans, but most of the country, most of Scotland doesn't know what their tartan is. And so we see these guys going to the clans, the head of the clan, I don't want to say clansman, the head of the clans going to these weavers and saying, we got to get a family tartan because the king is coming. And the guys at the weavers, they open their book and the head of the clan goes, yeah, I'll take that one. And that's it. So when you think about, that we have this long 400, 500-year tartan, that's our tartan, and, is our great, 10 times over great, it's not. Somebody went and said, I'll take number 42. And that became the Stuart tartan. And that is literally what happened. And so, so the king has a tartan made up. All these clans have tartans made up. And there's a couple of different ways to do it. And this is kind of a one-off here again. And you'll see this when we look at all that stuff over there. But there's a bunch of different kinds of pleats depending on what kind of kilt you're going to make. So at the workshop, and I should probably tell you that, so all of this came about because I was on sabbatical last year. I teach in the theater program at SMSU. And I found this workshop in Edinburgh at the Kilt Makery, or the Scott Clans is the store, and there's this place called the Kilt Makery. And so I signed on for that, and so it was a 2-week intensive on how to become a handcrafting kilt maker, not by machine, but by hand. And so we learned how to do that all by hand, and we did the knife edge pleats. And so you can see how they go over, and then there's a return, and that's how all these 3, I've made 4. These are, my son has 1, he's in San Diego. And so you could have the knife pleat or the traditional pleat, traditional box pleat. The King Gussie pleat goes the other way, and then it's got that in the middle where it kind of comes in like a box pleat and then goes back out. And then the barrel pleat, and of course the barrel pleat is more of a military pleat, and that gives you a lot more movement, which is what they would have needed in the military. But all of the pleats that we have are knife edge pleats. And typically, like if you have a pipe band, also and some of those are box pleats as well. It just kind of depends. So the king is coming, and the vestiarium scoticum comes into play. So it seems like it's a really big deal, but it is truly a highly controversial topic. So we've got these 2 yahoos called the Sobieski brothers, and they get wind of this big to-do that's going to happen with the king, and they're thinking, oh, we can make some money on this. And so they claim to be the grandsons of Bonnie Prince Charlie, and if you know anything about Scottish lore, Bonnie Prince Charlie it's like Jesus, and then Bonnie, well, close to the top there, right? And so they think they're going to get a one-off, or get an in, saying that they're grandchildren of Bonnie Prince Charlie, and they're not. And so what they do, though, is all of these clans that have picked these tartans, the Sobieski brothers are compiling all that information. And if they don't have the information, they just make it up, okay? And so, yeah, this is Bonnie Prince Charlie right here. No, they're big fat liars. And so with the Sobieski brothers, they create what is called the Vestiarium Scoticum. It is a highly controversial costume book. It has these swatches of these tartans. They've just kind of put stuff in. They've put clans in. They've put different kinds of tartans in, depending on what it's supposed to be for and all those kinds of things. And then they market it. And so this is what it's supposed to be. It's not real. Nikki Laird, who was the head of the workshop that I went to, she's like a walking encyclopedia on Scottish tartans. It's unbelievable. We have a Facebook group that she heads up through the Kilt Makery, and people will send in a swatch of something, and they'll say, I don't know what this tartan is, and she'll say, oh, this is the Harris Weather tweed. It was made in 1642 for the, and she's just like rattling off. It's unbelievable, unbelievable. This stuff made up, really made up. And so my next question, of course, so tartans are made up. Tartans are made up, true, yes. Tartans are made up. And so next here, plaid is the Scottish word for the garment originally meaning blanket. True or false? True, you guys are also smart, yes. Tartan is the word for the pattern. True. And so what happens is when the Scots come to America, they're talking about this plaid that they wear. And they're referring to the garment. But the people in America think they're referring to the pattern. So that's why we call a plaid or a plaid, because we thought it meant the pattern, but it actually is the garment. Yeah, right? True. So this is what is considered by some to be the oldest tartan. This is the Falkirk tartan. It's a piece of woolen textile recovered from a peat bog in Glen Affric in the Scottish Highlands about 40 years ago. And if you know anything about peat bogs are a really fascinating kind of thing, and they're all over, and they're all over Scotland and they're all over. But you can actually also store butter. There has been butter that has been found in peat bogs. Really interesting kind of stuff. Some people do not believe that this is a true tartan because of the dullness of the colors and the pattern. They don't think that that's a real true pattern of a tartan. This, of course, is a tartan. So this tartan is from 1794. It's a kilt worn by the 82nd Regiment of the Foot or the Gordon Highlanders. Maybe some of you know them as the Gordon Highlanders. Again, around 1794. It was made from 3.5 yards of material and has 23 box pleats across the back there. And so this is what we believe is to be the actual oldest kilt as opposed to the oldest piece of tartan. When we look at what the tartan is, or the plaid is, it comes on these big bolts like this. And so if I were to order something of this, make one of these kilts, I would get a kilt length. Okay, so you'd say you want a kilt length. And it gets a little complicated. I know some of you are seamstresses here, but so it's woven so that you can cut it and piece it together. Okay, so, and I'll talk about this a little bit when I talk about piecing it, but this piece right here, so this is a Holyrood tartan, is the kind of tartan that it is, and this piece right here is the middle of these two pieces. So this is an 8-yard kilt, so I got 4 yards, okay, and you have to know what your waist to your knee measurement is, and you cut this side, and then you go waist to knee measurement on this side, and you cut this, and then you rip the two sides, and then this is what's in the middle. And then you take this piece, and you attach it over on this side, and that's how you get your 8 yards that you're going to make your kilt out of. Women's kilts are typically 6 yards, men's are typically 8 yards. And that's, again, just it has become standardized. So when we look at the kilt, this is the front, and all the kilts are the same here. All kilts are the same. All kilts buckle on the right, and they have a flap under on the left that closes on the left. And so that's the front, and then this is the back that looks like this. And you can see on the back, you can see this kind of zigzag stitching, this Z stitching down here, that's holding all those pleats in place until you can steam it. Okay? Yeah, and so you can see, and that's what you want. You want the front and the back to look similar. That's called pleating to the set. And I'll show you the difference between pleating to the set and pleating to the stripe. When we look at the structure of a kilt, you can see the kilt on our left has 2 buckles, okay? That is typical. One is the buckle for the underbelt that comes through here, and then one is for the overbelt, or excuse me, the under apron and the over apron that buckles over here. And that's all you need. You'll notice where that orange arrow is, that's a Highland dancer, and they have 3, and they only have 3 just to ensure the modesty of the kilt. It's highly unlikely that it's going to come up higher than they want it to, but just to make sure they put that 3rd buckle in there. There are also lots of different ways to wear the kilt, right and wrong. Well, there's 2 ways, right and wrong. I guess there's only 2 ways to wear a kilt, right and wrong. So if you look at the gentleman in the blue tartan to your left, that's where you want the kilt to hit. You want it to hit right in the middle of the knee, like right at the kneecap, okay? The gentleman in the green, his kilt's way too long. Way too long. And to our American heads, that seems like it would be right that they should be longer like that, but you don't want it touching the sock. You really want it to be showing some of that knee between the kilt and the top of the sock or the boot or whatever. And even if you have slouching socks or shorter boots, you definitely want it to hit at the knee. That's where they want it. If you look at the right side, there's just a whole bunch of messy stuff going on here. And this is a fashion skirt, right? It's not a kilt. But it's got 4 buckles. And what happens typically when you have a kilt that's worn as a skirt is people want to keep it as tight as they can, so they pull it. Well, you've got all these stripes running down you, and you've pulled the belt. So now the stripes don't go like this, they go like this, right? And so you have to make sure that those stripes go up and down. Here's another indication of that. You know, we've got the two belts, but you want to make sure that it lays nicely. And you can see what's happening where that, right here, where that second buckle is, they're pulling it too tight. There's no reason for it, right? If it's made like a kilt is made, there's no reason to do that because it won't come up and it won't come open. I mean, you've got a whole flap. I mean, what am I doing that's going to make it go like that? I mean, that's a whole bunch of fabric, right? Because it's a whole, your under apron, your over apron are exactly the same side. I mean, they overlap to the side of you. I mean, you'd have to like try, right? You know, but again, this is a skirt, you know, as opposed to a kilt. You can't have a tartan if you aren't Scottish. True or false? Oh, false. That would make them very sad. They want everybody to wear kilts. They want everybody to go to Scotland. So this is a very famous personalities tartan. Some of them. Does anybody know who all of these tartans belong to? Yeah, he bought all the rights to them. She is very famous. She's very, very famous. And she's very pretty. And she wears little bows in her hair. No, it's Hello Kitty. It's Hello Kitty. These are all Hello Kitty tartans. And she's so fancy that they are all registered at the Scottish Register of Tartans. So unlike the Sobieski brothers who thought they'd make a quick buck and put all this stuff together, the Scottish Register of Tartans is actually the only register of tartans that is correct, you know, is legitimate in Scotland. So the Register of Tartans allows you to register things, to create tartans and things like that. There's lots of different scenarios, but these are some of Hello Kitty's tartans. And so you can see a couple of different things. All of her different colors, right? So there's Hello Kitty dress, Hello Kitty navy, Hello Kitty red, all the different ones. You also can see what the category of it is, right? So some of them are fashion tartans, some of them are corporate tartans, and so you can't utilize them. You can't go to a mill and say, can I get the Hello Kitty tartan? They won't weave it for you because it's going to be restricted. Also, you can see where the weavers are. So the Lacarne of Scotland is one of the weavers, and I think, oh yeah, here's the book right here. So one of the things that the workshop allows you to do, because it's considered an apprenticeship, and so once you're done with the apprenticeship, you are also considered to be a kilt maker. So I'm a kilt maker. And so with that, you are given the privilege to get things wholesale because it is you creating something as your project, right? And they see things like that, like handcrafted things. They just see them very differently in the UK. It's just they really applaud people who can do things with their hands. And so it's just a different kind of mindset. So this purple and black one, you can see it says the designer is Nicola Laird, and she's again the one that did the workshop and created the workshop for us. And this was done prior to when the Register of Tartans was created, but it has been registered. So she has to take it down, she had to take it down there, and she had to make sure, they make sure things like what's the thread count, what's the color, exact color, what's the dye, where you have it woven, all those kinds of things. And then you can see on the bottom, it says restrictions, yes, please contact the designer for details of restrictions, because she is the owner of that tartan. So again, you can't go to a weaver and say, we want that, because they'll get in a lot of trouble, and they all know, you know, what you can weave and what you can't weave. And so it really is only for the people who are affiliated with the Laird clan. And this one, just by when we went over there, so it was a year, we got back like a year ago at the end of April. And when we got to the workshop, this tartan here was all over the workroom. So the workroom is really small, and there were 6 of us in the workroom, and then the instructors. And we each had our own table, and our tartan and things like that. And like the wall, I mean, if I'm sitting here at my machine, like the wall is literally like right here, and kind of all around us. And behind us was a whole ensemble of this tartan, vests and jackets and long skirts and short skirts and pants and kilts and all the, like women's kilts and men's kilts and all this kind of stuff. And so this is what it looks like up close, and it is unbelievably bright. It's really, really bright. And so we were all like, what's the deal with the 100 yards of fabric behind all of us? And Nikki said that in the last, couple of months or so, she'd been working with the owner of this tartan to design it. So Nikki designed it with this person, and he wanted everything possible in your wardrobe to be made of this tartan. And so that's what Scott Clans does as well. They're also kilt makers, so they'll make all these different things. And he had trousers and then trews, which are kind of like that, plus fours, which are the things, the baggy pants that men wear for golfing, right? He had all the stuff. And she said, well, they've got a lot of money, and he needed a project. And so his wife gave him this project to do. And she said, well, and one of the big things is that his wife is going to wear it because she's a television personality, so she's going to wear this tartan on TV. And so we're like, who's that, And it's Prue from the Great British Baking Show. So her husband is John Player, and they were making jokes in the workshop that she was just really getting tired of him hanging around all the time, so she gave him a project. And so she said, hey, why don't you go design a tartan? And so he did. And so she's supposedly going to be wearing this at some time on the Great British Baking Show, so everybody can kind of see it. Yeah. Super fun. And she loves bright color, right? So yeah, and so when they said that, that totally sounds like something that's in their wheelhouse. And I've seen pictures of them, since then, and he's like that too, very kind of like colorful. And so, again, this is not a famous person. This is my beautiful son, Euchariah. But this is the first kilt that I made. So when we get to the workshop, it's a 2-week workshop, and the first day we walked in. So about a month before I went, I got an email from Nikki, and she said, okay, these are the different places you can get a tartan from. You can get them from Martin Mills, or you can get them from Loch Erin, and there's a couple of other ones, and House of Edgar and stuff. And so Euchariah's in the Navy, and so he looked for a Scottish nautical tartan. And so this is a black watch, which is affiliated with the Scottish Navy. And so we came in that first day, and there's this fabric sitting on a table, and and they've got a mug, and it just was so wonderful. And it was all hand sewing. So we just sat there, and for someone who is always having to tell people how to sew stuff as an educator, to sit there and be educated, and then just sit and sew and gab. It was just so wonderful. And the people there were from all over the place. So I was the only person from the U.S. The gentleman next to me, Alan, owned a kilt making business and a tartan store in Oban, which is a tiny town in western Scotland. And then the woman across from him is Amandine, and she's from France and didn't speak any English. Across from me was Silke, didn't speak any English, from Germany. This is Katja, who's from Germany, and so she translated for Silke because she couldn't speak German, anything but German. And then in the corner was Nicole, and Nicole was there as a weaver. And so she's in her early 20s, and she kept apologizing because she wasn't sewing as fast as all of us. And we're like, you wove your cloth. I think you're okay, right? And she was weaving it for her brother's wedding, and it was really, really fun. But they took you through the whole process. And so by the end of the first week, we had to be at a point where we were stitching down our pleats, and then we were finishing it up the next week. And then if they told us if we got done in time, they'd take us to a weaver. So we all got done in time, so we could go to the weaver. But there are lots and lots of famous Scottish celebrities. Here just is a sampling of them. So on your left there, that's Ewan McGregor. He's wearing the McGregor tartan. In the middle is David Tennant. And David Tennant is wearing the McDonald tartan because his real last name is McDonald. So he just changed his name to Tennant because there was already an actor whose name was David McDonald. And then Rod Stewart is wearing the Stewart tartan. And Rod Stewart wears a lot of tartans. I mean, he wears his kilt a lot. So you see him in pictures often wearing that. And then there's some more. So first of all, we have Alan Cumming, and Alan Cumming, I think, is like the quintessential proud to be a Scotsman. He loves being Scottish. And so we see him in a lot of different kinds of tartans, not necessarily tied to his family, but really having fun with all the different kinds of plaids or tartans. Just lots of different kinds of fun, all just it seems monochromatic, and yet it's all these different colors. So that's Alan Cumming. Oops, sorry about that. And then in the middle is Sam Heughan and Gavin McTavish. So Sam Heughan is in Outlander, and Gavin McTavish and Sam Heughan are good buddies. And they have these shirts that say, if I'm found dead somewhere, ask Gavin. If I'm found dead somewhere, ask Sam, right? They're ridiculous. And they're always driving around Scotland and all over the world on their motorcycles. And they're doing stupid stuff. And, they're basically 12 and they're all in their 50s. And it's really fun. But they're wearing non-traditional kilts. So they've got some leather straps on them and things like that, leather decoration. And that's this trend. And I wouldn't say it's a new trend, but it is a trend again right now, where people are making kilts out of atypical material and maybe not even tartans. So when we were in Inverness, I needed to get, I think it was a buckle. I think I buckle. And there was a kilt maker there. And, well, there's several, but she reached out and she said, oh yeah, I've got some materials if you need to grab some, because you can't really buy one buckle. You got to go buy like 50 buckles, And so I stopped by, and that's what she does, is makes these non-traditional kilts. So she's got a lot of them out of leather. She's got a lot of them out of different kinds of like piecework and quilting and things like that. Very, very cool stuff. And we'll talk about the other gentleman in just a second. There are no new tartans. False. We already know that. And that's why we want to talk about Sean Connery. So Sean Connery is wearing the McLean, the McLean of Duart tartan, and that's his mother's tartan. So that's not a Connery tartan. The Connery tartan actually is this. So these are Sean Connery's granddaughters. I feel so badly for her because somebody clearly dumped something on her at a party. But this is a new tartan that was revealed in the last couple of years in honor of Sean Connery, and those are his granddaughters doing that. And then, of course, the biggest proponent of the tartan is King Charles. When I started this, it was Prince Charles, but now it's King Charles. This is King Charles III. And so on your left, that's the Stuart hunting modern tartan. The Stuart hunting modern tartan. And if you remember, this is also a Stuart, right? That's a Rod Stewart's tartan, right? So that's the same thing. So if you look in like the Lochharn book that I have up here, you can look in there and you can see that it just depends. It's the weathered or the hunting or the modern or the classic or the, it's all different kinds of things. And so even though it's one clan, they've got several different kinds of tartans. The one in the middle is the Prince Charles Edward Stuart tartan, and I believe that picture in the middle there is taken outside the Castle of May, and so the Castle of May is in the very northern tip of Scotland. The next step is the North Sea, and so when we spent our time up there, we were in John O'Groats and then Thurso and Wick. And so if you're looking at Scotland, it kind of goes like this. And so this is Wick, this is Thurso, and this is John O'Groats up here. And the Castle of May is like right there. And it's where the Queen Mother, it's her home, she bought it. And so when he goes up to the northern part of Scotland, he stays at the Castle of May. He stays at his grandma's house. And he goes up there a lot, and they'll see him at the Highland Games and things like that. I don't think we all realize how small the UK is. I mean, England and Scotland, they're small. It's small. And so he goes up there and stays at the Castle of May. And then this tartan on your right there is the King Charles III tartan. It was woven in commemoration of his coronation. And some of these might look familiar to you. This is the Duke of Rothesay tartan on the left here. And I just saw a news story about this because Prince William and Princess Catherine Middleton, they were at the Isle of Mull, and they said the Duke and Duchess of Rothesay, because when you're in Scotland, you have a different title. And so that's the Duke of Rothesay tartan that was worn by Prince Charles, but when he's in Scotland, he's the Duke of Rothesay. I could write it down later for you. And so that's the Duke of Rothesay tartan there. And then the Lord of the Isles tartan, which maybe you recognize from the whole Princess Diana thing. He wore that several times when they were taking pictures. And then this is the Balmoral tartan on the right, which I think is just such a beautiful tartan. When we look at the components to the tartan, this is kind of how it breaks down. And so you've got the Argyle jacket, that little tailor jacket, waistcoat. You know, if you buy things in the UK and you're going to buy a jacket, you need to make sure that, you know, they're not American terms and things like that. So there's jumpers, right, that are sweaters. And but this is the Argyle jacket. Excuse me. And then he's got this belt and buckle that you don't need. It's not necessary at all, but sometimes people like to have it as a decoration. You don't need any extra buckles than the ones on either side of the kilt. And then there's the kilt, and then in the front of the kilt is a sporran. And so this is a sporran. It's just a little pouch. And then it's attached with a chain belt that goes around the waist, and you can put loops on the back of your kilt if you want to. They're not necessary, but some people like to do that. And then the kilt pin, and this is my kilt pin. It's a little puffin, because we worked on a farm called Puffin Croft, so she gave me a little kilt pin that's a puffin. And again, you don't need it, but some people like to pin the bottom of their kilt together. And then you have the hose or the socks. The hose come up and they're folded over, and underneath them is an elasticized band with the color or with the tartan hanging down, and those are called flashes. Inside your hose is a ski-and-do, and if you look at if you look at King Charles here, he has a ski-and-do in each of the pictures because it's part of the dress of wearing the Highland garb. And then this gentleman has on gillies, but they're hard to see because they're not open on the foot, on the top of the foot, like the ones in the drawing. But those are gillies, and then the laces wrap around his ankle. And then that's the whole ensemble. And then you can see the shawl. It's called a fly plaid, and then he's got the brooch on there as well. And this would be typical for like a wedding. So when we look at crafting, it really is very different than this, right? So we're not buying a pattern and making a kilt. So the folklore or folkwear one, you know, they're trying to get closer to the original, but these are all machine kilts. And you can totally go to Edinburgh or Inverness or Glasgow or St. Andrews or you can go anywhere down on the high street, like our main street. You can go out there and go into a kilt shop and you can buy a kilt. You totally can. But they're not made for you, right? It's like going to Walmart to buy a top. There's a medium, large, actually you can just pick the size that works best for you and then you buy it. And that's what these are, and that's not what we did. What we did was something done by hand. So a couple of fast facts about the kilt. Typical kilt lengths, when you lay it out, is, again, men 8 yards, women 6 yards. So these are both 6-yard kilts. That's an 8-yard kilt, because that's for my husband, and then these are both mine here. And the one that you saw that Euchariah was wearing also is 8 yards. On average, there are between 28 and 34 pleats in the back. You could all make a kilt with the exact same tartan, and you would all have different numbers of pleats in the back, because it all has to do with your measurement, okay? And even with the way that it's going to look in the back is going to be different for each of you, because you have to use your measurement to get the right fit on it, so that you don't have to have all the extra stuff. Dry clean only is needed. If for some reason I have to dry clean these, oh heaven forbid I would have to dry clean these, before I sent them or after I sent it, one of them I would have to, probably after. So I would send it to the dry cleaners, it would come back, and this would now look like a skirt, right? All the pleats would be out. So I would have to, this is all stitched here, so I would have to re-pleat it, I'd have to re-sew it, and then I have to re-steam it to get all the pleats back in. So you want to really be aware of that. They're pretty hardy garments. The only thing that at the workshop, at the apprentice shop, the only thing they said is really bad for kilts is stout. Brown beer, right? That doesn't come out so much. And then I'm thinking, well, then you just dip the whole thing in stout and then you're good because then you got a brown kilt. So it is not good. It doesn't come out. But, you know, if you get chocolate on it, you put it in the freezer. You can, I mean, it's the same kind of thing that we do with garments here, you know, and it's a wool, so you don't throw it in the washing machine because otherwise it'll be this big, right? Do not store kilts in garment bags because the moths will eat your kilt, and you'll be really sad if you take it out and you've got any kind of challenges with it. However, depending on if you get bigger, like if you, like we took our son Jed with us, and he's what they call a skinny malinky, so he's really tall and really skinny. And they said if you're making a kilt for someone, not a child, but someone who's like a late teenager, early adult, you can make a kilt for them that's basically expandable. Sounds brilliant, right? And so you would put some extra pleats in underneath here that could be let out. And so you could actually just expand your apron out as they expand, and then they don't have to buy another kilt. Especially if they, you know, it's a family kilt or they really love their kilt. So there's a couple of ways kind of around those things. Men's and women's kilts, under apron buckles on the left, the over apron buckles on the right. Always, 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 always. There are no exceptions to that rule. Always, always. And adult kilts do not have hems. So like I was saying, when you get that fabric, and you'll see on all of them, but when you get that fabric, you measure up from the bottom and cut, and you measure up from the top and cut, and you cut this away, and this becomes the edge of your fabric. That's the hem. There's no hem in here. This is the edge of the garment. And so you have to make sure that you really measure correctly, because otherwise your kilt's going to be too short or too long. And that's the big challenge with kids, right? I mean, making kilts for kids, that it's not this way, it's this way, right? And then the kilt doesn't fit them anymore. Yeah. So as we craft a kilt, woohoo, we're going to make a kilt. This is what you're going to see. So this kilt is laying, that kilt is laying like this. So this is the waistband here, and it's just kind of looped over the, oh, I'm sorry. It's kind of looped over the top. There's a fringe down the side, and you can do lots of different kinds of things with it. So this is just this tartan stitched on, and then some of the threads are pulled away. But again, you know, when kilt makers are making kilts now, maybe they're doing a different kind of fabric, so it's like an offset. So maybe the whole kilt is like a maroon or something, and then they've got bright green down this, because they've used a different fabric and pulled those threads off of there. So you can do that and kind of make it your own. Then you have the front apron that goes to your side, and it doesn't go to here, it goes to here, okay, just to the side. And then you have the buckles, and you can see there's my buckle there. My other buckle is right here. And then here's the under apron. These are the pleats, and then this is the fell. And so the fell is stitched, okay? And it's stitched all the way down, and that's what I'm working on with that one. And they're not hard. It's kind of like, it's like making a corset. Like, they're not hard, they just take a long time. They just take a long time. So this is all hand sewn down. And then what that does is it's a measurement on your body. And typically, for women, it's about 8 inches, 6 inches. Men, it's usually 8 or 9 inches. But you got to measure down to where their hips start, and that's where that fell hits. And so the idea is when they're dancing at their ceilidh, at their Scottish square dance, they can turn around, and that kilt's not going up any higher than that. And there's so much fabric in the back, it's not going to lift up. And so it really holds it in place. And then this is the inside. And so if I flip this around, here's my strap and my lining, and the lining is really something for you, right? I mean, nobody's going to see it, and so, and then here's your strap hole, the other side right here, and it's really scary to put the strap hole in because you just put all of your pleats in and you sew them, and then you have to cut the strap hole. It's very scary. It's the scariest thing that I've ever done making a kilt. It's just scary. And then, so there's the under apron, here's the front apron, and then here's the pleats. You'll see on that kilt over there that I'm still stitching the pleats down, so they've not been cut. Once the pleats are all stitched down, I have to go back in and I have to cut all the extra pleating out here. Otherwise, there's way too much bulk. And you can see, if you look at this kilt over here, so this is what the outside looks like. This is what the inside looks like. I mean, there's so much fabric in there, right? And so when we were at the at the apprenticeship, Siobhan, who was our teacher, she asked for all of our scraps, and there were 6 of us, so we all had different tartans. And so she said, well, no, I have something for you. I have something for you. So, those are things that, well, we could probably, if you're a quilter, you could, you always find, don't throw it away, right? And so she kind of gathered up all of these little pieces from when we cut out our pleats, and she came in the next day, and she had made us all little Highland cows. I know. And there it was a little keychain, and my little keychain came off, so I have to put it back on. But this is one way, and then this is another way, and then the back is just straight, and then there are these little Highland cow antlers, and then these little, I know. And then this is also part of the tartan that she sewed in and just pulled off the thread so it looks like the fringe on the kilt. I know. Adorable. Super cute. And so when you measure for a kilt, it's really very basic. You measure at the waist because they do sit here, and it's not our waist here. It's actually the waist right here. And then you measure down to the hip line, and then you measure down to where you want the kilt to hit. Men's all should hit at the middle of their knee. Women, it can hit wherever we want it to hit. Okay, but men's have to hit, are supposed to hit at about the middle of the knee. So very, very few measurements that you need to create this kilt. This is actually from a store in Inverness, just so you know how to tell if you're wearing the right kind of kilt or not. If your kilt is above the knee, then you're a boy. If your kilt is at the knee, you're a man. If it's below the knee, you're a liar, because you don't know how to wear a kilt. You don't know how to wear a kilt. So this is a little video of us ripping the tartan. That's Nicole, the weaver. So that's the black watch. And that's the second half of it. So we already ripped one, and then we had to rip the other. And it is really scary. It's really scary. Here's this super expensive fabric. Can you rip it?
Is the fabric?
It's expensive.
Price just like
yeah.
fabric varies?
Yeah. Yep. And so because I get it wholesale, it's about $70 for the 8 yards, which is incredibly cheap.
Yeah.
It's incredibly cheap. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's what it was, Right, yeah. But, if you go, and it's very different there. Trying to find a fabric store in Inverness was hard. It was really hard, and it was like a storefront. It wasn't Joann's. It was like a little storefront that had some things in it. And when we were up in northern Scotland, too, it was really hard to find that stuff. But you can order it, from the weavers, but it's not readily available because everybody doesn't do it. The kilt makers do it, and even the factory kilt makers do it, but people aren't just going and getting it and making a kilt. But it can be really pricey, yeah. And that's why, if you go to the high street and you buy a kilt, you're probably going to spend anywhere from 700 to 1,000 pounds. Yeah, and so $700 to us is about $1,000. Yeah, and that's one's on the machine, And so, and I know with Nikki, I've made these 4, and I could make it for $200 maybe, but they've got all that overhead that they have to do as well. And there's other things involved, there's the thread and the buckles and stuff like that, but what you're paying for is the person making it for, the labor, right, yeah. And then, at the apprentice shop, they did let us use a machine for 2 different things. We could use it to put the 2 pieces together, and we could use it to put the waistband on, but that was it. So all the fringe that we did, all the pleats that we tacked on, that was all done by hand, which is actually kind of great because when I left the apprenticeship, then we went up to northern Scotland and we were on a farm for 5 weeks, and I got some fabric before we left because I said, I got to make another one because I will not remember if I have to wait 2 months to make one and get back to the States and stuff like that. And we were in a caravan, basically a mobile home, and I could make it laying on the kitchen table, because I didn't need anything else to do it. So that was really, really great. When you look at the tartan, you have to kind of, before you start, you have to kind of size up what you're going to do. So this tartan, it's called a copper haze, which is this one, that's this one right here. And I could decide what I wanted down the front. So I could put the red stripe down the front, or I could have put the green stripe down the front. So you just have to make a decision, and then you have to be okay with it. Because it does depend on how big your apron is, the return is, how many pleats you have. That all has to work together. And sometimes you'll get a tartan that isn't that easy to do. So this is the Buchanan. And the Buchanan has a very long return, which means that it's got a set, but the set is really long before you get to the next one. And so to try to pick out the middle of it, you can't do it because the middle's here, and then the yellow stripe is here, and the next same exact yellow stripe is way down here, and you can't pleat it like that. So it has to be maneuvered a little bit differently, and some of the tartans are like that. And so if you look at the front, which is to our left, that's the marked out apron, and then the back marked out apron, and so it's supposed to be exactly the same. And I think that these pictures, one of them is a little bit bigger, but you can also see up here, that little white line over there, you can see where it is, right? On these two lines here, so on these two lines right here, that's the fell. So that's on the black watch, that's where I stitched the pleats to. This one is just a little bit smaller picture, but you can see that on the pattern, you can see that it hits in the same spot. And they had us practice, and we were all really bad at it. We were really bad at it. And so we couldn't figure it out. And that's the other thing. The more you do it, you can look at it and go, that's the middle. That's the return. You know, you can just do that. And so they had us kind of practice out with these different tartans that they had there so we could start to see it. Because if you've got 3 pleats here, you got to have 3 pleats here. You got to have 3 pleats, otherwise all of your pleating is off, and you want to make sure that that doesn't happen. And so, so it takes a little bit of practice. When we were there, though, Siobhan, who was my instructor, told us that if we have a real problem with it, you can take the waistband from the middle and lay it out, and then you basically just pleat to what you're looking, the pieces that you're the flat piece, you just pleat to the flat piece because it has the pattern on it. I'm not explaining that very well. So if I'm having trouble with it, I can lay this out. This is what my pattern is right here, right? I can lay this out here, and then I can just take all this fabric and go, oh, it's a blue line. Oh, it's a yellow line. Oh, it's a green line. Oh, it's a, you know, and it's much, much easier to do that than to try to guess it. And so we did that, but then sometimes you have to pleat to the stripe. The Buchanan had to be pleated to the stripe. So, so Katja, the woman who was sitting next to me from Berlin, she had a Buchanan. That was the kind that she wanted. And so she was pleating like crazy because she was just pleating it to the stripe, and we're all trying to figure out where the next line is. That's yellow. Oh, I need blue. It's over here. And she's like, zoop, 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 zoop. And so she got hers pleated really, really quickly. But this is pleated to the stripe. And so you can see here, so the 2 blue tartans and the 2 green tartans are the same tartan. And one is pleated to the stripe and one is pleated to the set. And again, some of it's personal preference. Some of it is, you know, is the look of it. If you're in a pipe band, they're all the same. So if you were to get an order as a kilt maker for a pipe band, you got to look at what all the skirts or all the kilts are already doing, right? And you got to do the same thing. And you got to make sure not only is it pleated to the set, but that dark blue square has to be 5 inches down, right? It's got to be whatever it is. It's got to be right in the middle. It's got to be off center or whatever, so that they all look the same. Somebody was asking me, I did this at SMSU last week, and they were asking if all the lengths are the same. And the lengths of the kilt aren't the same. They just have to hit every person at the same place, right? Because they're all different heights, but they all need to hit right at the middle there. And so we had these very highly technical little measuring pieces here. This is a piece of cardboard. And you have to have, you take your measurements and then you create them. I've got a couple of them here. And this is what you lay down. Once you have all of your pleats marked, this is what you lay down, and you do all your markings so you know where it's going to be on your kilt, and you do it for every single one that you've marked out. And again, like I said, it just takes a lot of time. And then you have to mark them. That's not the middle. So when you look at that shape, that black line is not the middle. Where I'm going to fold it is I'm going to fold it on that white right line. that's my pleat. Then I go down, and that's my pleat. So that is what my pleat looks like, because this side is going to come up to this white line, and that white line is going to go over to the next pleat. So you're always working like that. So when you're pleating a kilt, the kilt really is that way, and I'm working this way. I can't do it. My head doesn't work. I can't do it that way. It doesn't work. It's got to like keep coming towards me. Yeah. And then you pin them, and then you sew them. And you got to tack them first. So you tack all your pleats down, and then once you've got them tacked down, then you can fold them over to the next one, and you pleat them all up, and then you got to try it on. So this is Alan, and that's the shop you can kind of see behind us. So he tried that on, because what you don't want to do is get it all done and it's too big or small, right? So you got to try it on and make sure that it's hitting at the sides where it's supposed to, and all those different kinds of things, and then you're good to go. And there's the fringe on the front, just a couple of different choices on what that looks like. There's another fringe, and again, that's all sewn by hand. And some of it, I struggled with it a little bit, thinking, it's not straight. A hand did it, right? The stitches aren't exactly the same length. I mean, we strive for that, right? But there's something about somebody touched that thing and made it. So this is all the pleating that was just done, and then this is what it looks like when they're all cut away. Okay,
so you cut it to the...
Yeah, you cut it. I know. So you have to cut it out. So you have to be up a little bit higher than the bottom of the fell. So the fell is down here. So I'm going to cut it up a little bit higher. But then you have to cut it all out. You have, because it wouldn't fit. It'd be way too uncomfortable, and it'd be really hot, like right around the waist and stuff like that, if you didn't cut it away. And then you tack them down. And then you put a grosgrain ribbon in it to keep it all in place. And it does feel very kind of free-formy, but there's a lot of stuff going on, It's like those Victorian women that would get married, and then the night of their wedding, they take off their girdle and right? So I've heard. But that all is underneath here. So we've got this grosgrain ribbon keeping all of those things, all those pleats in place. Then we have to stitch and create that hole on the other side for the belt to come through and the buckle to be over there. Then we put canvas down on top of that grosgrain ribbon and on top of all of those pleats. And then we just keep, hand sewing. Here you can see the little edges of around that hole where the belt is going to come through. The straps are also sewn on by hand. And so you can see here, I have a couple that I've purchased. So this is the Celtic Knot black strap, and this comes with pre-punched holes, but the browns don't. I don't know, the blacks do, but the browns don't. So if you want the brown strap, you got to punch the leather holes themselves, or the holes in the leather themselves. And then when we were up in northern Scotland and I made that red kilt, I didn't have any belting, and so I just went online, and the woman that we were working on the farm, she let us use her address and things like that. And so I just bought some leather belting from the UK Etsy, and they sent it over. And I really like this leather a lot. And it's just all a personal preference. I bought this since I've been back, and it feels a little, I don't know, I'm a little worried that some of them are going to break, because you don't really want your kilt strap to break. But you can just sew them on by hand and be a little bit more decorative if you want to be. And then you put the lining in, and then you have to steam it. And we really thought, we were expecting, all of us were expecting in the workshop that, when you steam it, then, right? And they brought out this little teeny tiny, it was like this big little tabletop thing. And we're thinking, well, that's kind of anticlimactic. We thought it was going to be this big presser. And she said, I think that this is the second or third one that they've gotten. They've gotten them off of eBay. They're little teeny tiny, like home tabletop pressers. And I'm thinking, I want one. I would like to have one. I don't know. It just seems like it'd be something cool to have. And so we could put the whole thing in there, so you can see the buckles in there and everything. And we just kind of press it and press it. And at the university I have an industrial iron, so like this one I just did on the industrial iron. I cannot imagine trying to do it on a home iron. I think that would be really hard to do. But that worked really, really well. And we did all 6 of ours lickety split. So these are a couple of the folks that were in the workshop. So that's Katya with her Buchanan. plaid there, the kilt that she made when we were at the workshop. And then that's Alan and his lovely wife, and that's the kilt that he made. And again, he made it. He owns a kilt shop, and he would hire out people to make the kilts. And he's like, well, I'm just going to make them myself. So he went to the kilt shop, the kilt makery, to do that. And then this is Nicole's brother, and that's the tartan that she wove, and then she made it into the kilt while she was there. And she went to register it, and their last name is Scott, and she went to register it as one of their family tartans, and they wouldn't let her register it because it wasn't woven tightly enough. And she's teeny tiny. She's teeny, teeny, tiny. And she couldn't bring the shuttlecock down hard enough to cramp the threads to really compact them. And so after we left, they were going to do it again so she could register it. It's a really beautiful, really beautiful tartan. And it was not a bad day when he came in and tried that kilt on. I'm just going to tell you that much. We thought that was okay. She's like, oh, my brother's coming in. I'm thinking, ooh, Chris Hemsworth is here. It was really fun. And this is one of the kilts that, the place that when we were shopping in Inverness, it says, it's a kilt. If I wore underwear, then it would be a skirt. And then this is Alan's shop. The whole Highland dress thing, and a lot of folks, they dress up in the full regalia for the weddings. And it's so beautiful, where they can outside in the Highlands and things like that. One of the things that we learned about when we were here at the workshop was the heritage crafts. And so heritage crafts is in the UK, and it's all about keeping the traditional handcrafting items alive and well. And so if you look at this, I'm just going to let this play out here. So lots of different kinds of crafts, all done by hand. And so you can see these are the things that are either endangered or on the endangered list, or the red, or like don't exist anymore. And so they're trying to bring them back. People that actually make, do diamond cutting by hand. People that are silk weavers. Lots of cricket ball makers. That's an endangered, actually I think it's an extinct art form now over there. Nobody is making cricket balls by hand. We have a friend, Paul and I have a friend, Nadine Schmidt. Her husband is a traditional tinsmith. So he makes them traditionally by hand with only hand tools as opposed to any kind of machinery. And you can go on this website. It's really, really fascinating to see, and just the kinds of things, not even if they're endangered, but the kinds of things that people used to do at one point, things that we know about but maybe don't really think about. And so if we look at, all the thatching, right? Thatching, like roof thatching and stuff, that's an endangered, and that's, wow, really amazing stuff. And then if you look at the endangered list, kilt making is on that, and that's my into Scotland, because I don't go there in Scotland. Because that's one of the things, if you want to move to the UK, that's one of the ways you can move there, is that you possess a handcrafting thing that's on the endangered list, yeah. So I don't know, so if you want to get into boat making, maybe you can move to the UK, right? Really, really great. And then this past year, we got the notice. This is Nicole Laird, and she was awarded the Scottish Maker of the Year and the UK Maker of the Year. Very cool. And so she went down to London and got this big fancy award. And in true Scottish style, she took a picture of herself going back to Edinburgh on the train, and not a fancy person at all, just really in love with the Scottish culture, really proud of her Scottish heritage, and very, very cool that she got that award. So all of this stuff, all this crazy Scottish stuff, was made possible through a couple of different ways. One of them is teaching at Southwest. We get what's called contractual travel money, and it's meant to be used to do your own kind of research. And being in the theater, I do research all the time, but it's not really something that you're going to present. But this presented itself, this workshop presented itself, and I was just really fortunate to be able to go. And then I got a SMOC grant, which was fantastic because it covered every single thing for the workshop. It covered my flight, it covered my housing for 2 weeks, and it covered the workshop and the tartan. And I couldn't be more grateful. It just really opened up. Like, you think you know what you're doing, right? You think you know how to study, you think you know how to learn, you think you know how to sew, and then you do this thing and you're like, I don't know anything. Something totally new. It was really, really great. Yeah, really great. So those are some of my sources. I have lots of sources. Really, it should just be another picture of Nikki because she's basically the source. And then I leave you with this, just so you know. Scotland's all right, but I would like it better if you were in it. And I'm not saying that so that you leave and leave me alone. I'm saying that people in Scotland, they would like you to come and visit. And the first time that we were there in 2018, we went all over Scotland and a little bit down to the UK, but we were in Loch Ness, and I got stones for my kids. And I said, no, you have to take it back. You got to put it back in the lake. You got to go back to Loch Ness. And Jed did. I don't think he took his rock, but he went. But it's an amazing place. Some of you have been, I know, right? Yeah. Margaret, do you want to talk about what you brought with?
Well, that's not.
Get up here. So we spent a lot of time in Inverness, and Margaret and I have known each other for quite a while, and she was talking about how you spent time in Nairn as a teacher.
I taught in there for a summer for 3 months,
Mm-hmm.
and then came back to the U.S. I was working under, or with the University of Wisconsin at River Falls, and they had where you could go during the year, but I couldn't, at the school I was teaching at, I couldn't be gone during the year, so I went as soon as I could get out of school on a Friday in May, and then was there from May until almost the end of July, because their schools are year-round. So, but one of the things there, I had to live with a family, and I had 2 families that wanted to live with them, so that was really interesting.
Yeah.
And I would really recommend it because I had just a real great experience with this.
Yeah.
And then one of the things, my husband is Scottish, and so one of the things I was able to get was, this is called a jumper, and it's in the Greg plaid, the ancient hunting plaid. And so I got that, was able to get that. And I thought I would just bring it along
That's
because
so
this is,
great.
the wools are so beautiful.
That's really cool.
So,
Yeah.
but I had a great time. And when you live with a family, you do all the things that the family does. And 2 families wanted me to live so I could split my time. And so one was a family that had 2 young children. And that was interesting because I helped them with their reading and that at home at night. And then the other one was, he was at the end of his year and ready to go on into the university. And so that was an interesting time too. I have a lot of things.
That's
to tell
great,
about.
yeah.
That's enough.
Wonderful, just wonderful. Yeah, it's a really great place. Where have you been in Scotland? Just kind of around?
Well, we were in Inverness, we were in Loch Ness.
Yeah.
One thing that was
Yeah.
was interesting when I got to Nairn, there were 3 other Margaret Gregs. So there were 4 of us.
Anybody here named Angus, right? Everybody have their hands over there. Yeah. In the Inverness airport, there's a sign that says Fort William, and you may know Fort William from the Harry Potters. It's where the Hogwarts Express goes over the viaduct, right? That's in Fort William. And it says 55 miles or 60 miles away, right? What it doesn't say is it takes you 2 hours to get there because all the roads are like this, yeah. But it's a really, it's a magical place. It's really, and people are so kind, and it was just so fun. And we were there for Burns Night in January. That's what we flew in, and we flew in to make sure we were there for Burns Night. And so the traditional Burns Night feast is haggis, neeps, and tatties. And so my husband he just gave it the old college try, and he had it. So he had haggis, and then neeps are the turnips, and then tatties are the potatoes. And then it's in a whiskey sauce. So it doesn't really matter what it tastes like, I guess, because he said the whiskey was very good. And then we had a lot of sticky toffee pudding and, just millionaire shortbread, in the UK. And it was just, I've heard always that it's not, the food in England and the UK is not very good. And man, we ate well when we were there. We had really good food. So I would highly recommend going home and buying your ticket. They would love to have you. So, and I don't work for the Scottish Tourism Bureau, but I would love to. But that's it. So take a look at the stuff here. So these kilts are done, like I said. These are not done. You'll notice I have these hangers. I had to purchase these hangers because they are heavy duty. The skirts, the kilts will not hang on skirt hangers. They just fall right off. And then I've got a couple of different tartans here that you can request if people are looking at different tartans and things like that. So when Jim was trying to pick out the Holyrood there, we just asked for some samples and we had to pay for them, but there's little samples here, a couple of different books. Here's the sporan. This is the burlap that's in there. This is some lining fabric. This is the nutmeg. Excuse me, the nutmeg kilt here. This is the piece that came out from the middle of that. And then all the thread and the grosgrain ribbon and things like that. So it's not a third grade field trip. You can touch it.